It's caviar. It's the food of the rich. It is so sophisticated.
It's really like no other food. That taste of the ocean, of the sea.
Икра – это прежде всего это не еда, это не пища, это настроение.
It's not just food that you put in your mouth. It's an experience.
Caviar, known for being the most expensive food on Earth.
People are willing to pay amazing sums for it.
Throughout history, caviar has been the most coveted of delicacies.
It has this myth around it that adds to its value.
People associate caviar with sophistication and power.
Caviar has it all. On the one hand, royal families consume caviar, and on the other hand, criminal gangsters. So the upper world meets the underworld.
In the past, it was actually the food of the poor. When I lived in Russia, we had caviar for breakfast because it was so plentiful.
Today, it can sell for up to $35,000 a kilo.
Everyone's heard of caviar. People associate caviar with luxury. It's the most expensive food on the planet. But I suspect that very few people understand where caviar actually comes from.
This extraordinary food is, in fact, just the eggs of a fish. But this is no ordinary fish. This is a fish whose fate has been shaped by politics, religion, and war. Once plentiful, they are now the most endangered group of species on Earth.
It's 250 million years old. It's like we are losing a dinosaur from our planet.
It could withstand ice ages, and it could withstand all the changes that have happened to the world in the last 180 million years. But the one thing they couldn't withstand was industrialization.
History has not been kind to this fish. It is kind of amazing that they have survived this long.
Now the battle is on to save this extraordinary prehistoric creature.
This really is a race against time. If we do nothing, these species will undoubtedly become extinct.
This is the incredible story of the sturgeon and one man's obsession to save it from oblivion. Nowhere is the sturgeon more entrenched in its history and culture than the Caspian Sea. At 1.4 million square miles, the Caspian is the biggest inland body of water on the planet. It's larger than all of North America's Great Lakes combined. It's a remnant of the ancient ocean Tethys, which around 50 million years ago connected the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. Today, it is completely landlocked. Some 130 rivers feed into the Caspian, but its unique biodiversity is now under threat. During the Soviet era, pollution from oil refineries, dam building, overfishing, and poaching has led to a massive 90% decline of the Caspian sturgeon population. And now the Caspian is in grave danger of being unable to sustain marine life. One of the 5 countries that surrounds the Caspian Sea is Azaerbaijan. This former Soviet republic, straddling east and west, is leading the way to protect this fragile sea. In its capital, Baku, once an ancient Silk Road center and now a modern marvel built on oil wealth, the stage is being set for the Caspian Sea nations to restore the fragile health of this rapidly deteriorating marine environment. Leading the charge to bring back the sturgeon to the Caspian is marine biologist Rory Moore. Rory works for the Blue Marine Foundation, whose aim is to protect and restore marine environments across the globe.
I love Azerbaijan because it's different, it's an adventure, something is always happening. But it's very different working here to any other places where we have projects.
His mission for the last 4 years has been to establish a marine protected area in the south of Azerbaijan. If successful, this 100,000 hectare stretch of water will be the first of its kind in the Caspian Sea, and will create a safe haven that will give the sturgeon one last chance to make a comeback.
My main fear is that 6 species of sturgeon are going to go extinct unless what we're doing right now works. We have to restore the natural habitats for these fish, otherwise they're not going to be able to spawn. I don't think failure is an option, really.
Today, Rory is addressing representatives from the Caspian countries at a summit held by Azerbaijan's Ministry of Ecology.
My job today is to convince people that marine protected areas work, that this marine protected area in Azerbaijan will work for sturgeon species, because it's an area that's crucial for the first few years of their life.
Rory believes the only way to protect the sturgeon from being lost forever is to sign this marine protected area into law.
And if we don't do it, then these fish will become extinct.
But there is far more to this fish than providing luxury food to the rich and powerful. To look at a sturgeon is to gaze back to an ancient world. These amazing creatures have withstood the tests of time and have barely changed for millions of years. They are designed to be survivors. Their skin is rough, thick, and covered with their protective armor, bony shell-shaped plates, otherwise known as scutes. Of all the freshwater species of fish, sturgeon live the longest, with an average lifespan of 50 to 60 years. The beluga sturgeon can live to over 100. They're bottom dwellers and use their 4 whiskers, or barbels, which dangle in front of their mouths, to feel for food. But despite surviving whatever killed off the dinosaurs and the Ice Age, over the past 150 years, this fish has been brought to the brink by humans. The turning point for the sturgeon's fortunes in the Caspian began during the final years of the Russian Empire. After 2 world wars, the Bolshevik Revolution, the Soviets' quest for modernity, and through the construction of dams and factories, the sturgeon population was sent into a downward spiral.
Stalin built the Volgograd Dam as part of the process of electrifying Russia, which was a major step towards industrialization. And that spelt disaster for the sturgeon because it blocked their path back up the river to migrate, so that they could no longer go to all their old spawning grounds.
Any attempts to stabilize the sturgeon population were scuppered by the breakup of the Soviet Union, which led to a frenzy of overfishing. Numbers plummeted to a new low.
It absolutely decimated the sturgeon population. People knew that if they could get that caviar to the west, they could make enormous fortunes.
For the last 4 years, Rory has been building his case to secure the first marine protected area in the Caspian. The proposed site is next to an area of fishing communities in southern Azerbaijan. During the 1970s and the 80s, towards the end of the Soviet era, sturgeon and salmon were fished to the brink of extinction, which led to a Caspian-wide ban in 2009. With a dwindling number of fish to catch, many here are struggling to make ends meet. This stretch of water could be the perfect place for sturgeon to thrive.
This shallow, brackish bay is crucial because when sturgeon come down the river, they come out of the river mouth and they look for a shallow area that's not too salty because these fish have just come out of fresh water. It's all they've ever seen, so they need to adjust to the sea.
But there is a problem. It's perilously close to a traditional fishing ground. These fishermen have come from miles around on their motorbikes to scrape a living from whatever fish remain in these waters. Like many generations before them, they're using gill nets, which are walls of netting that trap fish by becoming entangled in their gills as they try to swim through.
Gill nets are a massive problem for sturgeon because we know that once or twice a year they come from the sea and they come to the river mouths and they swim up them to spawn. So the fishermen extend these nets over the river mouths or up the shoreline and they'll catch anything that's moving. It just shows that this area really, really needs protecting because there's very little to stop this happening.
With the value of caviar so high, any sturgeon caught in these gill nets are a temptation to keep.
The fishing communities around here, they live off the sea, obviously, and it's a really grey area between what's poaching and what's not. We never see sturgeon in their boats, but then they'd never show us.
With barely any sturgeon left to catch and poor returns on other fish, many in these coastal fishing communities have fallen on hard times.
You can't underestimate the impact you have on communities if you're trying to protect these fish. These fish are incredibly valuable. If you're taking away the opportunity for someone to poach a sturgeon, you can be taking hundreds of dollars away from their household, which means you know, a yearly income. So it's dangerous because these fish are so valuable. There's a price on their heads.
In these closed fishing communities, talk of poaching is a taboo subject, and many feel bitter that it brought about the demise of their livelihood.
I'm Rory.
Zafar.
When you were fishing years ago, before sturgeon fishing was illegal, did you catch very big fish around here?
En büyük balık 450 kilogram.
Bölge balığı.
Beluga balığı 450 kilogram. Ancak 100, 150, 200 kilogramlı balıklar həmişə olub.
The sturgeon, the fish, must have been a very big part of your life. Now that it's gone, does that feel like a great loss?
Nərətifli balıqların azalmağı, yoxa çıxmağı əlbəttə bizim ölkəmiz üçün, elə bizim kəndimiz üçün də böyük itkidir. Çünki bizim iqtisadiyyatımızın böyük bir hissəsi idi vaxtilə nərətifli balıqlar. Azərbaycanda olanlar da dünyanın hər yerinə gedir. Təkcə biz üçün yox, bütün dünya üçün itkidir. Mən bayaq qeyd elədim.
Securing this 100,000 hectare site as a protected area would mean that all fishing would be banned, giving the critically endangered sturgeon a chance at survival. Accompanied by local park rangers, Rory is heading out to the vast open waters of the Caspian. He wants to take a look at what lies beneath the surface, something very few scientists have done.
So right now, we're in the channel that runs from the Caspian Sea right up into the Vilice river mouth. So I'm looking for the ideal habitat for juvenile sturgeon, and I need to find food for them because if they can't feed, they can't be here. If I can prove that this area is perfect for sturgeon once they come down the river and they sort of acclimatize to the Caspian Sea, then I can put together a really good argument to protect this area. Let's see what we got. This is great. Look at this. This is full of shrimp. It's full of tiny crustaceans. This is exactly what sturgeon want to eat. You can see here, tiny little shrimp. This is the ideal diet for juvenile sturgeon. This is what they're going to be feeding on for the first few years of their life before they make their migration out into the Caspian Sea, where they might spend 15 years before they come back to this river to reproduce again. So this couldn't be better.
No one is certain just how many sturgeon are left in the Caspian and its surrounding rivers. International experts have predicted that at the current rate of decline, sturgeon will be fully extinct in the wild within just a few years. Rory would be extremely lucky if he saw a wild sturgeon here. So he's going to try a completely different way of finding this elusive fish. Something never done before in the Caspian Sea. In Surrey, just outside of London, UK, a team of researchers are using a groundbreaking tool that changes everything in marine science. Using environmental DNA, or just eDNA, scientists can now identify fish and other animals just by collecting a small sample of water.
eDNA is genetic material that we collect which isn't attached to the animal that it came from. So what we now understand is that when animals live in water or they come into contact with water, they leave traces of genetic material, just like how when we touch things with our hands, we leave a fingerprint, and there's DNA in that fingerprint that we can use to identify the person it came from. And we can catch that material from the water and isolate the genetics from it and use that to identify the species that it came from. The old way of doing it was quite invasive for the fish, so it involved pulling them out of the water, electrocuting them so they're stunned, and the more we can do to reduce the impact that we have on the actual animals, the better.
eDNA testing is a new technology. When I was in university studying marine biology, it didn't exist. If you wanted to know which fish were here, you'd have to net for them, you'd have to dive and see if you can find them, and then you'd have to track them. With eDNA testing, I can find out what's here without doing any of that. Now, no one's ever done that in this national park, no one's ever done that in the Caspian Sea. So it's a real first, and it's going to be really exciting to get the results. There's been so much overfishing in this sea over the last 50 years that we don't know if they're here anymore. So I would hope to find sturgeon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 species of. I'd hope to find Caspian salmon. And then I think we might find some lamprey, maybe some pike perch, and we might find something that no one even knows is here. And my biggest fear is that there's not going to be anything in here. We're going to take it to the lab and they're going to tell me that there's no fish.
Collecting an eDNA sample might only take a few minutes, but Rory will have to wait several weeks before these results can be revealed. The Caspian isn't the only part of the world where sturgeon can be found. In fact, they inhabit the waters all across the northern hemisphere. 9 of the 26 sturgeon species can be found in North America. And just like their Caspian cousins, history has been deeply unkind to them. In the late 1800s, there were more than 15 million sturgeon in the Great Lakes alone.
Sturgeon originally were very, very abundant. They were so abundant that they actually became a nuisance to commercial fishermen in their gear. So often they would just take them out of the nets and they would throw them on shore and stack them up like cordwood, let them dry out. They would burn them in steamers on the Great Lakes as fuel.
It wasn't always universally loved and desired. For a very long time, people in Western Europe and in the United States were repulsed by this fish. And amazingly, if they would catch a sturgeon, they would feed the roe to their pigs because it had no value to them.
This all changed in the 1880s with the arrival of European caviar traders.
A couple Germans came over and showed people how to process the caviar and how you can make a very nice smoked meat product. It was called Albany beef at the time. And a huge industry then sprung up for the flesh and especially for the caviar, and they would ship barrels and barrels of caviar back to Europe.
The nouveau riche of France and Germany had completely taken to caviar. Many important establishments, such as the Ritz Hotel in Paris, started to include caviar on their menus.
For a brief time in the late 19th century, New Jersey was the largest producer of caviar in the world.
There was more caviar going to Europe from the USA than from Russia.
It was so abundant because there were so many sturgeon. So for a number of years, the bars would just use them like they would peanuts. They would use just for bar food, just to bring the patrons in. And it was a nice salty thing, so it made people drink more beer.
In this frenzy of demand, the rivers and lakes in the eastern USA became emptied of sturgeon.
It was a gold rush. There was just so much money to be made. Nobody really thought about, well, if these sturgeons aren't spawning and if there's no new generation being born, there'll be no sturgeon next year or the year after that.
In just 30 years, sturgeon catches went from tens of thousands of fish down to only a handful. The world's insatiable appetite for caviar almost wiped out the entire American sturgeon population.
When you catch a sturgeon, you don't just catch one fish, you eliminate the possibilities of future generations.
"100 years later, in the heart of the Midwest of the United States, the sturgeon has become a conservation success story. Rory has traveled to Wisconsin to find out how one sturgeon population has managed to make an incredible comeback.
In the Caspian, we're up against so many challenges. It's kind of easy to think that it might be impossible to restore these populations, but they've done it here in Wisconsin. And I want to learn how they've done it and take that back to the Caspian to restore populations there.
For Rory, this is also a very personal journey. It is in America where he first developed his affection for this prehistoric creature.
Ever since I was a kid, I've been around fish. I spent my summers on my uncle's sturgeon farm in California, taking the eggs from the fish, fertilizing them, fishing a lot, taking the fish out of the tanks, and ever since I was sort of obsessed with rivers, with the ocean, and with marine conservation in general.
Rory is heading for a small town called Shawano on the banks of the Wolf River. It's known for being the best place on the planet to see sturgeon in the wild.
This town is clearly all about sturgeon. I'm driving down the main road here, and I've just driven past a 5-meter-long sturgeon at the side of the road. Not a real one, but it's they're obviously very important to the people who live around here.
Sturgeon are extremely fussy about where they lay their eggs, and just to find the right spot, they'll travel over 100 miles, covering up to 20 miles a day to reach their spawning grounds. The fish's internal wiring demands that it returns to the same area, even to the same spot where it was hatched many years earlier. Despite dedicating many years to saving the sturgeon, Rory has never seen one in the wild.
I'm excited. You know, I've been working with these fish for a long time, and I've never seen sturgeon in the wild, and I've never seen sturgeon spawning. So for me, this is a big event. It's really exciting to go and actually see these prehistoric fish moving up a river and spawning naturally. There's no other place in the world where you could do that. No way. That is unbelievable. Right here. They're spawning right here on the gravel. They're coming right up onto the rocks and laying their eggs. There's the female releasing her eggs and the male fertilizing them. I've never seen anything like this before in my life. Remarkable, absolutely remarkable. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And they're everywhere. There must be hundreds of them. What a great success. It's hugely exciting and hugely encouraging.
Rory has been invited by the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources.
Hello, Rory.
And is joining Ryan Koenigs, who leads their highly successful conservation program.
What we have here in Wisconsin, particularly the sturgeon population in the Winnebago area where I work, is probably the strongest sturgeon population in the world.
How old are some of these fish spawning right here?
Some of the fish in our population we believe to be over 100 years old.
Wow.
There's a wood carving up here. That's a fish that we handled in 2012. That fish was 87.5 inches long. We estimate that that fish would have been 100 to 120 years old when we handled her. There's some very nice fish within the Winnebago system. You'll see males today, 6 feet long or longer, and you might see, if we're lucky, you might see a female that's close to 7 feet long.
I think people from all around the world would want to come and see this, because this doesn't happen anywhere else.
Yep.
And people do come, lots of them.
There's thousands of people come through here. Kids will be bussed in, from different schools, and people from out of state. Everybody comes around just to see the sturgeon, and it's a big deal for everybody. The word gets out, and they come.
The Sturgeon Run is one of America's great natural spectacles, attracting crowds from across the country.
It's a big deal to have the sturgeon in Wisconsin. We've always heard about it on the news, and this was the first time that we've gotten to take a shot at checking it out. It's pretty exciting.
For biologists Ryan Koenigs, this 10-day spawning period is by far his busiest time of year. Sturgeon have been making the same journey up these waterways for the past 14,000 years. They've one thing in mind: to reproduce. In the shallow water, females lay their eggs on the rocks. When they are ready, the males suddenly thrash their tails to secure a good position next to a spawning female. Within 7 days, thousands of these eggs will be hatched, but only a few will make it to adulthood. Ryan and his team are responsible for monitoring the fish and to gather as much data as possible.
We measure the fish, we determine whether they're male or female.
75.6.
You got that, Mike? And we check to see if they're tagged or untagged. And that information that we're collecting allows us to learn a lot about the population.
114.
When the fish are as big as you, it makes the job a little difficult. If you want to work with big fish like this, you got to be tough.
Gotta go do it then.
With approximately 45,000 sturgeon in the Lake Winnebago system, another pair of hands is certainly welcome.
You're gonna help me on the board. We're gonna measure the fish so you can be on the tail, help getting the fish out of the net.
Okay. What have we got?
We'll see if this one is
Oh, look at this guy. I'm just taking the fish out, we're measuring them, we're seeing if they're a male or a female, and we're pit tagging them. I think this is a male. Okay, 47.
47.1.
I've handled farmed ones before, but never wild ones. They're strong. They feel like one great big piece of muscle. It's pretty tiring work, but it's good fun and it's worthwhile. I hope we can do this in the Caspian one day.
Sturgeon have made such a rebound in Wisconsin that they can now help revive the lakes and rivers in other states from which sturgeon died out decades ago.
One of the main ways to rehabilitate a fish population is through stocking. So what we'll be doing today is we'll be actually collecting eggs and sperm from some of the fish that we handle today.
Oh, female, look at the eggs coming out of that. Wow. Roughly how many eggs would a fish like this hold, Ryan?
Probably the average female in the Winnebago system has about between 800,000 and 1 million eggs.
1 million eggs.
The sturgeon needs to lay an enormous amount of eggs because the chance of producing offspring in the wild are incredibly slim. Just 1 out of every 50,000 eggs released by the female will make it past the end of the summer.
Basically, caviar right there. As fresh as you can get. Amazing.
For nearly 30 years, Richard Klett has been raising sturgeon.
We're going to fertilize each individual group with an individual male. Make sure certain groups of eggs are getting fertilized by different males.
Yeah,
so
sure.
We'll grab our milk. Actually, you only need a few little drops in here. And the sperm really isn't going to do anything until we add water.
Oh, yeah? We're kind of replicating what's happening just behind us in the bay here, right?
Yep.
So after we fertilize these eggs, Rich, how long do they take to hatch?
Typically, it takes about 7 days.
To most people, this is caviar. We have a couple of hundred of these on a cracker and it's caviar. To us, this little egg is going to grow into a fish that's going to grow for 100 years. It's going to swim up and down this river 50 times in its lifetime. I mean, it's just the most incredible story.
As part of the DNR's sturgeon conservation program, these fertilized sturgeon eggs are taken to the nearby Wild Rose hatchery. In this giant indoor facility, the next generation of sturgeon are being reared, and after 12 months, they'll be released into the wild. But sturgeon conservation is a notoriously slow process. It will take at least 20 years or more for these juveniles to start producing the next generation in rivers across the USA. It's Rory's last day, and he's just about to take an important call.
So I just had an email last night from the eDNA lab in the UK telling me that they've got the results through from the samples that I took from the marine protected area in the Caspian to see if there are any sturgeon present. So I'm hoping that there's going to be sturgeon there, but we'll see. Hey, Kat, it's Rory. How are you?
Hey, Rory, I'm great, thanks.
I hear that the eDNA results are in from Azerbaijan.
They are. So, yeah, I'm happy to sort of talk you through them. So, in total, we found 21 species of fish in the 2 filters.
Wow.
Also 20 species in 1 filter, and 10 of those species were found in the 2nd filter. Sadly, none of them were sturgeon.
Oh, no.
It's not the news Rory wanted to hear.
Sorry, I know it's disappointing, but it was always a long shot to find something rare in just 2 samples.
But it does add weight to his campaign.
I think the fact that we didn't pick up trace of any of these fish just strengthens the argument for protection and restoration. This makes me want to protect these fish even more.
In the USA, conservation programs have helped the sturgeon to fight back. Rory's aim is to do the same for the sturgeon in the Caspian Sea by creating a marine protected area, the first of its kind.
Someone needs to care about the sturgeon. You know, a lot of people don't know anything about sturgeon because they're big, they're slow, they're old, and they're ugly, and you know, they're very, very hard to see. But these fish are very, very important for the ecosystems where they live. They're incredibly important culturally, and they once were an incredibly important source of protein for coastal communities in the Caspian.
Since the end of World War II, the battle to save the sturgeon in the Caspian was consistently being lost. During the 1950s, to make up for the devastating impact that dam building had on the sturgeon's ability to spawn, the Soviets began to build many hatcheries across the Caspian and released millions of sturgeon into the rivers. But despite the population stabilizing, their habitat continued to degrade.
I mean, the Soviets really had no environmental sensibility, and the Soviet Union was enormously polluted. I mean, they would dump all kinds of things, nuclear waste. I mean, they were very cavalier about all sorts of pollution. So the combination of the dams and the factory pollution really had a tremendous effect on the sturgeon populations.
And then, in 1991, came the breakup of the Soviet Union. Communism had been hard enough on the sturgeon, but capitalism would prove far worse.
The dissolution of the Soviet Union resulted in the collapse of management and control systems of the fishery industry. Consequently, criminal groups emerged to take over the activities regarding caviar trade. And this resulted in the end in overexploitation of sturgeon stocks in the 90s.
Everyone became a poacher. It became a free-for-all. People went out poaching just to feed their families.
Caviar became also an underground method of payment. It became a form of bribery. During this time, it was crazy. Caviar was everywhere. Poachers were active on a massive scale. It was estimated that the illegal trade was around 6 to 10 times the legitimate trade. I think there was also this case with a funeral car with half a ton of caviar being seized by the officials in Russia.
In the 1990s, Russian authorities battled with organized crime groups to put an end to the caviar black market, which had become increasingly violent.
It's not just a luxury food, no. It's a dangerous product as well.
In 2002, in response to the high levels of poaching and the illegal trade, Russia banned the sale of all caviar produced in their Caspian Sea territory. Then in 2014, sturgeon fishing was banned throughout the entire Caspian Sea. And now, Russia is working to restore the sturgeon population in the Astrakhan region, once the caviar capital of the world. But despite this, poaching in the Caspian is an ongoing problem.
Poaching in the Caspian for sturgeon has been disastrous for the populations. It's too easy to catch these fish when they're migrating.
In response to the growing problem of illegal fishing, Azerbaijan created an anti-poaching task force to patrol its 500-mile shoreline on the Caspian.
Məlumat daxil olub ki, Xəzər dənizinin Neftçala rayonu ərazisində, akvatoriyasında deməli qanunsuz balıq ovu ilə məşğul olanlar var. Onunla bağlı əməliyyat tədbirlərinə başlamışıq. Əməkdaşlar cəlb olunub.
Ismail and his team have to be prepared for anything. Poachers here can carry guns.
Hər hansı bir təhlükə baş verərsə, bu təhlükənin qarşısını almağa hazırıq. Silahlı ola bilərlər, silahdan istifadə edə bilərlər. Onun üçün də biz tam hazırlıqlı vəziyyətdə onlarla mübarizə tədbirlərini həyata keçiririk.
Görüşən kapitan.
The crew has spotted a suspicious fishing boat in the distance. They have to reach it quickly before the fishermen can dump their illegal catch overboard. If they're caught red-handed, this is a serious offense. there has been a serious decline in all types of fish, and for some fishermen living in areas where economic opportunities are slim, catching a sturgeon is a risk worth taking.
Əsas məqsədimiz nəhər həkimlərin nəslinin kəsilməsinin qarşısını almaq. Əksinə, nəhər həkimlər bərpa olunsun, əvvəlki illərdə olduğu qədər nəhər balığı Xəzər dənizimizdə mövcud olsun.
It's clear these fishermen haven't committed any offense. Judging by today's catch, there isn't much to celebrate. Even if they wanted to net a sturgeon, they'd be lucky to find one. A sign of the times in a sea whose marine life has suffered decades of overfishing and industrial pollution.
We cannot save sturgeon, and we cannot stop poaching unless there's an alternative for fishing communities. We need to build industry, we need to educate people, we need to create awareness. And there needs to be a viable alternative in rural regions. Otherwise, people will always poach these fish as long as they exist.
Caviar entrepreneur Rufat Tabasaransky has a plan that could provide a lifeline for both the sturgeon and the local community.
Я сейчас собираюсь навестить одного человека, который очень хочет завязать своим браконьерским прошлым. Мы нанимаем браконьеров, потому что считаем, что, во-первых, они очень хорошо разбираются в осетровых, в осетроводстве. Многие из них когда-то работали на аквакультурных фермах еще при Советском Союзе. И мы надеемся, что, предложив браконьерам альтернативную работу, мы сможем уменьшить воздействие на дикую природу. Добрый день, Яша.
Like many in this area, Yasser is struggling to make ends meet as a fisherman.
Приняли нас. Яся, вас когда-нибудь ловили?
Или пяли.
Было такое. Хорошо, а если, предположим, вот, давайте так, мы вам предлагаем работать у нас на нашей компании, вы согласились бы?
Пяли разум.
Отлично, отлично. Очень. Наша задача это как раз сделать так, чтобы в море осетрина опять появилась. Поэтому очень надеюсь, что если как-то вот вы сможете эти новости распространить, и мы бы больше к себе привлекли рыболовов. Все, добро пожаловать.
This vast building site will soon be a state-of-the-art sturgeon farm. And it's here where Yasser will join many other locals to help raise these giant fish to produce sustainable caviar. The demand for caviar has never been higher, and it's set to continue to grow. Once responsible for the sturgeon's demise, today it is the caviar industry that could hold the key to the sturgeon's survival.
Aquaculture or fish farming has a bad reputation, and rightfully so. People associate aquaculture with pesticides and antibiotics, and we haven't done it very well until now.
Within just a few months, these giant ponds will be teeming with sturgeon.
Проектов такого размера на побережье Каспийского моря на данный момент не существует. Мы очень надеемся, что в этом проекте нам удастся не только производить осетровых, но и создать некоторый хаб для научно-исследовательской деятельности.
Not all the sturgeon on this farm will be harvested for caviar.
Дело в том, что наш бизнес, он работает над восстановлением. Мы за каждую проданную нами баночку выпускаем 10 мальков в дикую природу.
Returning fingerlings to the sea certainly can have an impact. We've seen with sea trout and salmon that hatcheries play a major role in conservation, but we have to ensure that when we put these fingerlings back that they're genetically strong and they're able to survive in the wild.
Unlike wild-caught fish, which have a much larger gene pool, farmed fish can come from a limited genetic stock. If the genetics aren't diverse enough, releasing them into the wild could cause major problems, as any interbreeding might lead to a weakened genetic line. By turning poachers into gamekeepers and restocking the Caspian by releasing hundreds of young fish every year, people like Rufa are showing that conservation and aquaculture can work together.
Разница в sustainable икре и обычной, она в том, что потребитель, который выбирает sustainable икру, он знает, что он не наносит вред природе. И мы понимаем, что сейчас, если таких людей будет становиться больше, то мы дольше будем сохранять нашу планету.
I think that if people learnt about the story of the sturgeon, how much of an effort it is for this great female fish to swim through the Caspian Sea, to swim 500 kilometers up the Kura River and lay her eggs, then to swim back past a maze of gill nets into the sea. I don't think people would want to eat wild caviar.
Nearly 3 billion people depend on the ocean for food. We already take more fish from the ocean than it can naturally replace. But although nearly half of the seafood we eat comes from farms, over 1/3 of fish caught is converted into fish meal to feed farmed fish. This is putting great pressure on the oceans and contributing to their decline. For every kilogram of farmed fish, farmers use the same weight in wild-caught fish, such as anchovies or mackerel. Another major ingredient for fish feed is soy. Huge demand for this crop has led to massive deforestation. At the same time, demand for fish around the world has been soaring. The end result? Empty oceans and destroyed ecosystems. As concerns about our oceans and food supply grow, people are rising up to the challenge in the search for solutions. In the heart of the Netherlands, known for being the Silicon Valley of agriculture, researchers have come up with a groundbreaking way to feed fish. This is the largest insect farm in the world. They're being bred to help tackle the rising global food problem.
Insects are really packed with valuable nutrients, so that includes proteins, but also fats that the fish require.
Because of the high protein value, insects can easily replace the proteins in fish feed. The insects can be fed with fruit and vegetable waste, which makes them the ideal, sustainable and natural ingredient for fish feed.
So in essence, insects can help the oceans by being a very good replacer for the proteins that people at this moment get from the oceans.
So far, insect feed has been trialled on salmon, and the results have been successful. Trials for feeding sturgeon have just started, and this could pave the way for many other fish farms around the globe.
We need to change the way aquaculture is being executed today. If we don't, then we will deplete our resources, in particular in the oceans, more and more. And it will result into the extinction of many species.
By changing the food that our food eats, not only can we help preserve marine life, but also meet the nutritional needs of a world whose population is set to hit 10 billion by 2050.
Here we are now. It's been a very difficult project, and as we all know...
Following years of fieldwork and investigation, Rory's pleas have been heard, and it's decision time.
Great task indeed. I think the take-home message for me is that we mustn't lose hope. We must keep trying. We must keep doing scientific research, and we must keep working with local communities because we don't have any choice but to save these fish. Okay, thank you very much. I hope I showed people that a marine protected area in Azerbaijan will restore populations of sturgeon. And I just hope that it happens soon.
It's now or never for this legendary fish, which has been around since the time of the dinosaurs. It's the dawn of a new era for the Caspian sturgeon.
I've always had a dream that sturgeon could make a comeback in the Caspian. With the marine protected area, we've got a real chance of that. It's going to take some time and it'll take some investment. But I'm confident that in a generation, we'll be seeing more of these prehistoric fish. This is what we're here to do, right?